The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the air thick with tension. Every seat was taken, people sitting shoulder to shoulder, their eyes locked on the defendant's table. The name Thomas Donaldson had been all over the news for days, and now, here he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. He walked in with a smirk, his slicked-back hair shining under the bright lights. It was the kind of smile that said, "I own this place." But to everyone else, it felt like he was mocking them. Thomas was the kind of rich that seemed untouchable. He owned yachts, mansions on both coasts, airlines, and private jets. His company, Donaldson Investments, had once been seen as a symbol of financial success. But behind the fancy ads and big promises, there was betrayal. He had taken advantage of trust. Promising families a better future, he convinced them to invest everything: retirement savings, college funds, and inheritances. By the time they learned the truth, it was too late. The money was gone. Homes were lost. Parents had to look their kids in the eye and say, "We can't afford this anymore." For some, it wasn't just about losing money. It was about losing hope. When Judge Michelle Brown entered the courtroom, the room fell silent. She was known for being fair, calm, and committed to justice. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Michelle," the bailiff announced. The crowd stood as one, everyone except Thomas. He stayed seated, flipping through a notepad like this was just another meeting. His lawyer whispered something to him, but Thomas waved him off without even looking up. Judge Michelle stopped at the bench, her gaze sharp as glass. She didn't say anything about his disrespect, not yet. But the silence grew heavier, almost unbearable. "You may be seated," she said, her voice steady. The trial began and the weight of Thomas's crimes became clear. Loretta Jones, a single mother of four, sat in the front row. She had lost her home because of him. Beside her was Rogan Mark, a retired firefighter who had spent decades saving lives, only to lose his life savings to Donaldson Investments. Each victim's story hit like a punch to the gut. Loretta's voice cracked as she spoke about the day she realized she couldn't pay her mortgage. "I begged them not to take my house," she said, tears rolling down her face. "But they didn't care. My kids and I slept in our car for 11 days. Do you know what it's like to tell your children they can't go home?" Rogan's testimony was just as painful. "I spent 30 years running into burning buildings," he said, his voice full of anger. "And this man burned my future to the ground without a second thought." Through it all, Thomas sat there completely unbothered. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, whispering to his lawyer now and then. To him, their stories were nothing but background noise. Then came the evidence. The prosecution showed emails where Thomas had ordered his team to fake documents. One email read, "Make the numbers look good and professional. We need these suckers to sign." The courtroom went silent as the words were read out loud. Loretta shook her head in disbelief. Rogan clenched his fists. "Thomas." He smirked. When asked if he recognized the email, he leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Yes, I recognize it," he said. "But let's not pretend it means what you think it does. It's just business talk. You wouldn't understand." Gas rippled through the room. What would you do if you were the judge? Would you stay quiet? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Judge Michelle's gavel hit the desk like thunder. "Order in the court," she commanded, her sharp eyes locked on Thomas. "Mr. Donaldson, I suggest you watch your tone. This is not a boardroom." But Thomas wasn't worried. He kept mocking the process, rolling his eyes, laughing at the prosecutor's questions, even whispering jokes to his lawyer while victims spoke. Then everything changed. During Loretta's testimony, she stood at the witness stand, holding a crumpled piece of paper. Her hands trembled. "I trusted you," she said, her voice breaking. "I trusted you with everything I had, and you destroyed my family." Thomas didn't even look up. He scrolled through his phone, acting like he wasn't even there. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interrupted, pointing at him. The defendant isn't paying attention. Judge Michelle's face remained calm, but her eyes burned with anger. Mr. Donaldson, she said, her voice icy cold. Put your phone away, now. Thomas barely glanced up. I'm checking something important, he said, holding up the phone like it was an excuse. I said now. For a second, it looked like he might argue, but with a sigh, he set the phone down, like he was doing her a favor. Loretta's voice shook. I don't understand how someone can be so heartless, she said. I don't understand how you can sit there and act like none of this matters. By the end of the trial, the evidence was undeniable. Thomas's lawyer tried to make him seem misunderstood, but the truth was clear. The verdict came quickly, guilty on all counts. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Reporters squeezed in for space, victims held each other's hands, and Thomas sat at the defense table, still smirking. Judge Michelle's voice was firm as she spoke. Mr. Donaldson, you have been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and your behavior during this trial has been terrible. You have shown no remorse, no responsibility, and no respect for this court or the people you've hurt. Thomas's smirk faded. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Michelle announced. Gasps filled the room. On top of that, I am ordering the sale of your assets to repay your victims. Every dollar you stole will be returned. Thomas jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. You can't do this, he shouted. I'm Thomas Donaldson. You can't treat me like this. Judge Michelle slammed her gavel. This is my courtroom, Mr. Donaldson. Sit down. As Thomas was taken away, the courtroom burst into applause. Loretta Jones covered her face, tears running down her cheeks. Rogan Mark let out a shaky breath, his eyes shining. Outside the courthouse, Loretta spoke to reporters. No sentence can undo the damage, she said, but at least now we have hope. For Judge Michelle, this wasn't a victory. It was simply justice. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility. And for the first time, Thomas Donaldson had to face it. If you like this story, share it with your family and friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.